All right, welcome back to Pennsylvania. Once again, we are back in Perry County, here just across the river from Harrisburg, the state capital. And I was here a couple of weeks ago. I filmed a bunch of videos here in Tuscarora State Forest, not State Park, State Forest. Some people are getting confused at that. And I'm back in the area, not actually in Tuscarora State Forest, but anyway, this natural area, the Box Huckleberry natural area, is maintained by the State Forest. And as you can tell by the title of the video, there's this supposed to be a 1,300-year-old plant or plant colony of box huckleberries that grows up here. But we'll talk about that. The way to describe it is perhaps a bit deceiving, but we'll discuss that. Not a whole lot of an area to park here either, just right alongside the road. This is off of Huckleberry Road, just south of New Bloomfield in Perry County. And I will give you a warning too, give you a nerd alert. And there's one channel I watch sometimes, he has a little symbol up in the corner flashing, nerd alert. I don't really know how to do that. I'm not really tech savvy with the editing sometimes, but yeah, a nerd alert. I am going to talking about these plants, the box huckleberry, and why it's so old and so rare. We are going to get kind of rather nerdy and some botany stuff, so if you don't want to hear me nerd out about plants and stuff, you might want to, now's your time to run away or click away, watch another video or something. But anyway, I'll try not to get too nerdy, but in order to describe what's going on here, we have to delve into the realm of botany a little bit. So anyway, I'm going to quit blabbing for now. I will do a lot of blabbing later in this video, but I'm going to get my bag packed up, trying to get a little more coffee in me. Look at hiking. I think they have like a short, like quarter-mile trail you can hike here. And I might want to get off the road here too. Anyway, all right, I'll get back to you. So let me give you just a better idea of where I am for those of you who might want to come visit. Like I said, this is Huckleberry Road. That takes you out to Route 274, and if you would turn left, it would take you right up to New Bloomfield. And just over here is, it's called Arbutus Lane. Of course, it's a private drive, so make sure you don't park here to access the natural area. But that's Arbutus Lane. It's named after a wildflower. Let me zoom in on that. Like I said, there's not much parking here. Just a little area right here where you can pull over off to the side, and the trail heads up that way. So that's how you get here. And it is a beautiful morning out here. I'm actually wearing a long sleeve shirt this morning. Here's the sign for it. Like, I guess this is the little loop trail. The Box Huckleberry Natural Area, Tuscarora State Forest. So the trail goes that way. They also have some signs up here as well. Alright, let's figure things out. Alright, so I'm just going to follow the yellow blazes. And where is this 1,300-year-old plant? I'm pretty sure this is it right down here, growing along the trail. The box huckleberry. You see, that's an awful big or awful spreading plant. Well, it's a colony of plants. It's not just a single plant. It's a colony. And that's what's growing all along the trail here. The box huckleberry. Well, they grow about a foot tall. Of course, this is like a 10-acre tract of woods here, and they kind of grow all along the ground here. Of course, there's a few other little small trees growing in here too. Of course, some of you might be asking, well, what are huckleberries? These are box huckleberries, but there's different species of huckleberries. I think there's the black huckleberry. They're very similar to blueberries. They're in the same general family, and they often get confused for blueberries out in the woods. There are a few small differences. I think the main thing is blueberries have soft seeds. Most of you have eaten a blueberry, and you can just eat them. You don't actually feel the seeds when they're in there. You can just kind of swallow them. But huckleberries have hard seeds. I think like 10 hard seeds in the middle that make them not quite as enjoyable to eat maybe as regular blueberries. You have to like spit the seeds out. So otherwise they look very similar to each other. So if you want to know what huckleberries look like, just think of a blueberry. Give you the general idea. And this is actually a pretty rare plant as well. Here in Pennsylvania, there's only 3 colonies, if I remember reading correctly. There's this one. There's a second one in Perry County, off to the east about 20 miles, which is supposedly a lot older than this one, but that one has some sad history to it. It was pretty much almost completely destroyed. And then there's another one over in Bedford County, which is probably at least 100 miles away. So only 3 known colonies currently here in Pennsylvania. Here they have a little sign for it. Registered Natural Landmark. Box Huckleberry Site. 1967. And once again, you can just see it growing all along either side of the trail. Whole floor is covered with it here. So it is a very rare plant. I think all in all throughout the eastern US there's maybe 100 colonies or so of it. And that raises a question, why is it so rare? And that's where we have to delve into some botany stuff in just a bit here. Actually, it's, you know, all botany and history aside, this is a really nice location here, nice little trail. Here, I don't know if you can hear that on camera, some of those chickens nearby, a rooster's crowing. All these plants, these box huckleberry plants, are supposedly clones of each other. And it easily could be, but I'll talk about that a little bit later, how that is not 100% necessarily true, depending on how you look at things. But anyway, the idea is that these are all clones of each other. The box huckleberry reproduces primarily by the roots spreading underground, and new shoots grow up from those roots, and that's how the colony spreads. So the idea is that 1,300 years ago, one box huckleberry plant sprouted here and grew, and then they spread 6 inches every year, and so they figured how large this colony is. And if it grows 6 inches every year, how many years would it take for it to spread, like roughly 10 acres or whatever? And they came up with anywhere from like 800 to 1400 years old, they say this colony is. So these plants are clones of each other. They weren't spread by seeds. Although the box huckleberry does produce seeds, but most of them are infertile seeds. So there isn't actually any single box huckleberry plant here that is actually 1300 years old. The colony is potentially 1300 years old, but each individual plant is not. Each individual plant might only be, a couple years old, maybe a few decades old. And that original plant that sprouted here and started a colony is long gone. These plants, individual plants, don't live that long. It's just that they spread by roots, if that makes sense. So the original old plants are gone, because they're always setting up new shoots every year to replace, plants that have died and stuff. So you can think of it as just one large, colony all intertwined underground by the roots and stuff. So as I turn around, we look at an individual plant. The individual plant itself is not 1300 years old. Yeah, so down here are some more of these box huckleberries. Like I said, this plant here is not 1300 years old. The colony potentially is. It's a lot different than say, like a really old tree, like those old, they call it the bristlecone pines that are out west that are potentially 4,000 or 5,000 years old. Yeah, when they talk about those really old trees, like I said, the bristlecone pine, some of the redwood trees or the giant sequoia trees, those trees, when they say that tree is 2,000 years old or 4,000, it actually is 4,000 years old. That one single tree. It's not the same thing with with this colony like this. And you'll find like YouTube videos where they talk about, you know, the oldest living organism in the world. You know, there's some spruce tree colony in Norway or some aspen colony out in western US, how they're tens of thousands of years old. Well, the problem is there's no plant there that's that old. It's just that the colony could be that old, but there's no individual plant that's actually that old. So it's kind of deceiving a little bit. Like I said, you're not going to find any huckleberry plants in here that are actually 1,300 years old. They're constantly replacing each other as a colony. Same with those spruce tree colonies or aspen tree colonies that are claiming to be 10,000, or one site said maybe even 100,000 years old. There's no trees there in those colonies that are that old. It's just that the colony could potentially be that old. So there's a difference there. And that is an important difference, because you know, people come out to these sites and think, oh, these bushes are 1,300 years old. Well, no, they're not actually. So I mean, like I said, the colony as a whole could be that old, but no single individual plant is. Like I said, they're constantly replacing themselves. The older plants die, and they're replaced by the newer ones that grow up from the root systems. Try to think of the difference this way from a science fiction aspect of like cloning people and stuff. If you have a person who actually is 1,000 years old, it'd be quite obvious that they're 1,000 years old. Not sure what they would look like if they would look really old. That's different than someone who's maybe every 100 years is being cloned. You know, as they're getting ready to die, they clone your body and imprint your old memories into the new clone. You know, and 1,000 years later, you've gone through, you know, 10 clones. But when you look at that new clone, it doesn't look 1,000 years old, because it's not the original person. Even though they've been cloned for 1,000 years, it's still the same. You know, it's a clone. It's not, but it's not the actual individual. Does that make sense? You know, like if you actually live to be 1,000 without being cloned, actually age-wise, the same body 1,000 years old versus being cloned every 100 years old. That's kind of the difference a little bit. So these, like I said, these plants are being replaced every so often by the new ones. All right, I'm not a clone though. At least I don't know. Unless the aliens are cloning me. All right. So there are a number of other side trails. The main trail goes back down to where I parked. But let's go up this way. I think this is still on the natural area. Still a nice trail, but there are no actual, I don't see any box huckleberries growing up this way though. So we've left the colony. Looks like this goes and turns around this way. You know, this trail is taking us pretty close to somebody's house. I guess this part of it's still on public land here. Alright, so let's get back to why these plants are so rare. These plants, they do produce like huckleberries with seeds in them, but the seeds are not fertile. All right. In plant world, you know, most plants have flowers. Not all plants, but a lot of plants have flowers, like out here in the woods and stuff. And I guess this is nerd time. Some plants have what are called complete flowers, where they have both male and female parts on the same flower, the anther and the carpel, male and female parts. Some plants have incomplete flowers, where you have separate male flowers and separate female flowers on the same plant. Like if you ever grow pumpkins or watermelons, they're like that, because you can tell the individual male and female flowers. The female flowers have an enlarged ovary behind the large yellow flower already that will eventually turn into the watermelon pumpkin if they get fertilized. So some plants have complete flowers, some have incomplete flowers, and some plants have actually the male flowers and the female flowers are actually on completely separate plants as well. And that can be that can have disadvantages sometimes, depending on the plant. And we're back with the box huckleberry again. You can see it growing on the side here. We've entered the colony once again. Now some of those plants that have complete flowers, both male and female parts, they can fertilize themselves. That's called self-fertilization. So they don't need another pollinator to be fertilized. They can fertilize themselves. Other plants, even though they have complete flowers, they cannot self-pollinate themselves. The ovaries will not be pollinated by pollen that comes from the same flower or even from the same plant. And that's the case with these box huckleberries. Sorry, it's a big truck driving past down there. These box huckleberries, if they are pollinated, if a female flower is pollinated by a male flower within this same colony, it will not result in fertile seeds. Seeds will be produced, but they will be infertile. So that's why this colony, although it probably produces lots of huckleberries, they'll all be infertile. So it cannot spread by seed that way. It needs to be pollinated by a plant or a flower from a separate colony in order to produce fertile seeds. And the closest colony to this one is 20 miles away, so that's not going to happen. So that's why they're so rare. That's why they don't spread so easily, distance-wise. I mean, they'll spread like by the roots, like 6 inches a year, like we said. But as far as spreading by seed, no. You need, unless there's another separate colony close by that they could get fertile, that they could actually have, positive fertilization, I guess you could say. So at one time, there was probably quite a few more colonies of box huckleberry around that they could pollinate with each other and have fertile seeds, but those days are gone. And that process may have started long ago already, but no doubt that process was hastened by, in the 1800s, there was tons of logging happened in Pennsylvania. They just cut down all the forests and everything. Because you notice the box huckleberry is growing. It's growing in the shade here. These like a little pine forest here. But when they log everything out, all of a sudden, plants like the box huckleberry are exposed to direct sunlight, and a lot of those colonies probably died off. A lot of colonies were probably turned into farmland and all kinds of stuff. So at one time there was probably more colonies around that they could fertilize each other, but now, it's not like that anymore. Now you just have a few scattered colonies. And I do want to mention too that it's actually pretty difficult to prove that this colony is 1,300 years old. It's a cool concept, but you would have to actually do a DNA analysis of every single plant in this colony to show that they were all exact clones of each other. It could have originated from one plant. That is possible. But, it could be a result of several plants as well that all sprouted in this area at one time. Still maybe several hundred years ago. But like I said, scientifically, you'd have to sample a leaf from every single plant to prove that they're exact clones. I don't think anybody's done that. They probably sampled a couple of leaves. That's just something to consider too. Because there's the colony that's nearby, near a place called Loesch's Run, which is a creek. It's actually across the river, the Juniata River from Loesch's Run. And that colony, they say, was 10,000 years old around. Because that colony was almost completely destroyed when they put in Route 322. It seems kind of odd that they would. Anyway, it's kind of a tragedy too, actually, if you think about it. But once again, they can't really prove that that colony was 10,000 years old. It's kind of fun to create really old dates like that, but once again, you're assuming that just one single plant created that whole colony, and that may not necessarily be the case. And that colony was supposedly rather large, covered quite a huge area. So I would think that that was a result of maybe several plants forming colonies. Because a lot of ways these huckleberry seeds get spread by birds and also by bears. Bears love to eat blueberries and huckleberries. So, and that's one way that the seeds travel. Like a bear will come into a colony, eat the berries, walk several miles down the trail, do a poop, and the berries come out. And the berries can then sprout if they land in a good area that's has nice fertile ground. And a single pile of bear poop will have multiple seeds in it. And that bear most likely will come back several days later and eat more huckleberries and take off in the same direction and do another poop out some more seeds. So a colony that large is probably a result of several plants. But once again, the only way to prove it is to take a DNA sample of every single plant in the colony, and that's just not going to happen. But regardless, it's still a unique place, a unique plant. Consider this colony, whether this colony of huckleberries is 1,300 years old or only 500 years old, it's pretty cool. Or if it's 2,000 years old, it's still pretty cool, in my opinion. And since they're so rare too, this is only one of 3 places here in Pennsylvania that they grow. It's pretty awesome. Of course, this whole time I'm walking along and we're talking about huckleberries and blueberries and stuff, and I'm wondering, are there any berries on these plants? And lo and behold, there is. See, it looks like a blueberry. It's the only one I've seen. But they do get eaten by birds and stuff. And the berries are kind of like the plants. The plants are really small, so the berries are not that big either. That's how big it is. Yeah, not much to it. They are sweet though. Just wasn't much more skin than pulp or anything. Alright, I guess we'll leave the rest for the birds to eat. And as I'm walking along too, I'm just still thinking about all this nerdy stuff. Another thing to consider too when dating a colony like this, you're assuming that the plants spread 6 inches every year, and that's not necessarily true. There could be different factors that affect how fast they spread, things like that. So when you're calculating years like that, it can be kind of, that's why when I did my research, some sites said it's 1,400 years old, some sites said that this colony is only 800 years old, so the sources themselves disagree on how old like a colony like this is. So I think they've just many sites just kind of averaged it out and said, oh, 1,300, because that's not really an average between 1,400 and 800, but still. So even the scientists that study places like this disagree on how old a colony like this is. So that just shows you a lot of times those dates are not set in stone, however much an article likes to say they are. There can be differing opinions about that. But like I said, it doesn't really matter because it's a cool site regardless. And I'm glad it's been preserved, because like I said, there's that other colony 20 miles east of here that was almost destroyed by building a highway. I don't know if they didn't realize how important that colony was or not, but it's just kind of sad. There are still remnants of it left, but they're all private property and right next to Route 322, which is like a really busy 4-lane highway, so I wasn't going to bother trying to check that out. So yeah, a beautiful little gem of a place to come visit. And just be mindful that this is a protected area, so you can't come here and dig plants up. That's one of the reasons why it was necessary to protect this area, actually. Like, I talk about the other place that got destroyed by the highway. They're having trouble, people coming in here. I think some of the local nurseries are coming in and just hauling plants out by the truckload digging them up and selling them. So it's kind of unfortunate you have a plant that's so rare. Hey, let's dig it up and get rid of it. So anyway, so just be mindful of that too. It is a protected site, so don't try and take one home with you. All right, I think that'll be it for this place. Cool little spot, just a cool little bit of history and science here, just to consider how old this colony is. Regardless of how old it is, it's really an interesting spot. All right, so that'll be it for this video. I'm gonna hop back in a Jeep and I'm gonna head back into Tuscarora State Forest. I have some unfinished business there. I wanna hike a little bit in the Frank Massland Natural Area. I know last time I was there, I kind of ran out of time. I want to get that done today. Maybe go somewhere else. Might stop in at Colonel Denning State Park, do a little bit of hiking too. See what happens. Might get some rain today too, but I brought the umbrella along. Anyway, thanks for coming along, and if you do get the chance to come here, do so. It's just a short, like quarter-mile trail to hike, kind of nice and shaded. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you around.